There are families that come to World's End State Park, and they come back year after year. There are really families that have been coming here for 5 generations, and occasionally all 5 are here. And that's pretty amazing. I know a gentleman who has been coming here for 73 years, he said, and the first year he was in utero. So he comes back and he brings his children and his grandchildren, and now there's a great-grandchild.
I love
and that family time and family memories encompasses it all.
Imagine a place where stress fades, fresh air fills your lungs, and adventure awaits around every corner. Welcome to Think Outside, the podcast that inspires you to explore, connect, and embrace the outdoors. Welcome to Think Outside with the Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation. My name is Marci Mowery, your host, and today I'm at World's End State Park with Jane Swift, the Environmental Education Specialist. Thank you, Jane, for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm really happy to be here.
Let's just start World's End, Whirl's End. I've seen several different names over the years. Can you give us the origin of the name of the park?
Sure. Back in 1932, the Department of Parks and Waters decided this would be a beautiful place to create a forest park. And when the geologists came and studied the area, they, of course, noticed the S-shaped bend in the Loyalsock Creek, which runs through the park. And as the water comes downstream to that S shape, it causes the water to turn back on itself, creating a whirlpool effect. It's not a whirlpool that's going to suck anybody down.
Oh, thank goodness.
But when the water is high, it's very obvious that you want to stay out of it because you might just struggle to get to shore. So he thought then that World's End would be a perfect name for it. However, this caused a big controversy. The local historians, the local people were like, no, it's called World's End. And no matter how much they petitioned, the state would not change the name. However, in maybe 10 years later, the 1940s, a map was discovered that showed this S-shaped curve area was called World's End. And so the state relented and gave up and changed the name to World's End.
World's End.
Yeah.
And can you help our listeners understand where in the landscape we are? Where is World's End?
So World's End State Park is located just outside Forksville in Sullivan County in what is called the Endless Mountains region of Pennsylvania.
And it is a beautiful place.
Mm-hmm.
My husband and I have had the honor of being hosts here for the past month. And I think about rain, people like, oh, it's ruining my camping trip. But it just has brought out all the wildflowers. The water's running strongly. So the waterfalls are just gorgeous. And it's also helping to mitigate wildfire danger. So
that's correct.
Love the rain. So can you help our listeners understand what your role is? What does an educator do in a state park?
So World's End has one educator, and it's a seasonal position about 8.5 months out of the year. And I've had that position since 1998. And the purpose of the educator is to provide educational programming for park visitors. And I do that in a variety of ways. I do programs for any age group. So I have a preschool gardening program in the spring, and I teach archery lessons to anyone who is age 9 to 90. I lead guided hikes to help people explore the park on the trails. I do some history programs. I actually go into the local school districts and do educational programs there. And occasionally I get a field trip from a local school here at the park.
And before we started recording, you were helping me to understand the difference between a Dutchman's breeches and a squirrel corn, which look very, very similar. So you have a lot of knowledge that you're able to share with the public.
Yeah, well, thank you. Wildflowers is about my favorite subject. So I lead many wildflower walks this time of the year. I'm looking forward to having one this Saturday.
Awesome. There's so much to learn when you go on a guided hike. And if people are not campers, are they still able to participate in those educational programs?
Definitely. It's open to the public. There are a few programs where I might say not advertise broadly. I have found that if I advertise on social media, I get way too many participants. So sometimes I keep it just a small group with campers.
Yeah. Well, some of the trails are more challenging, and some of the programs, if you have a lot of people, you might be stepping on things. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's not easy taking a hike with 50 people.
No, it's not. And something that people might not think about is 2 weeks ago, you had a pancake breakfast here because one of the things that you do is make maple syrup. You have a lot of sugar maple trees within the park. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, making maple sugar and maple syrup has been like a hobby of mine for many years. And I thought, why not bring it to the park? So I was able to purchase with park money an evaporator and all the other equipment I would need. And when I return after my winter break in February, I start right in with tapping trees. So it's not a big operation and it's a one-woman operation, but I love it. And it's a great way to engage anyone who might be staying here at that time of the year, whether they help me a little bit or mostly they like to come and get samples. So I did have a maple syrup breakfast, which had about 75 people, all from the park visitors. And it was a great experience. So I hope to continue that in the future.
Yes. I think people, having attended it myself, people seemed very appreciative of it. And I'll clarify that the campground isn't open in February, but the cabins here at the park are open. So,
well, I waited to have the breakfast till the lower loop did open.
Right.
So,
but in February, it's not quite that. That's a little cold. With 28 years of experience in the park, you must have a lot of memories. Could you share one of your funniest or most memorable moments and your time as an educator here at the park?
I think the most memorable experience for me was when I had a TV crew here. It was from Pennsylvania Outdoor Life. And Don Jacobs, who was for many years the narrator for that show, convinced me to take his cohort, Stan Sawa, who some of Pennsylvania listeners today will know who that is, out of Northeast Pennsylvania. He convinced me to take him out on a trail, which I did, and we had a grand time. He was very interested in edible wild plants and wildflowers, and we discovered quite a few along the Double Run Nature Trail and ended our time sitting by the Loyalsock Creek, enjoying some wild leek soup and some sumac-ade, and just toasting to the beautiful park that this is here.
And there's something special about gathering and preparing your food.
That's for sure. Now, in the state parks, people and visitors are not allowed to pick wild flowers or anything else except berries or mushrooms and some nuts. And to that point, it's only enough for your family to have a meal. It's nothing can be picked here that can be sold elsewhere.
And I think that's really good to clarify that. So you can get some for your family, personal use, but not for commercial use.
Yes. But as an educator, I have the ability to take small samples of things so that for the learning experience.
Could you tell us about the park through the seasons? How does the park change through the seasons? What might people expect if they were to come here in the winter versus spring, summer? What can they do? So we're in spring now. So why don't we talk a little bit about spring?
All right. So spring's a wonderful time to get out. As we talked, there's lots of wildflowers on the trails. right now, here, the trees are pushing out their leaves. And spring does come a little later here to Sullivan County. I learned that when I moved from New Jersey to Sullivan County, that I was expecting spring to really be at the beginning of April, but it really doesn't come closer till the beginning of May. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Temperatures can still be quite chilly at night. So spring gives you opportunities, though, to observe nesting birds as the season progresses, and other small animals maybe are giving birth. We don't always get a chance to see them, but there's a lot of wildlife in the area, and anyone would catch sight of a doe and her fawn out in the woods.
As you move into summer, what changes with the park?
So when summer arrives and school lets out, park gets a little busier. There are more daytime visitors coming here, and everybody really wants to be in the creek. So the Loyalsock Creek runs directly through the park from its headwaters in not too far outside the county, all the way to the Susquehanna and Williamsport. And the water is always cold and refreshing, really refreshing. So people enjoy swimming in our beach area, but also anywhere along the creek. And campers can swim in the creek directly across from the campground. And that's particularly enjoyable because there's rocks to jump off of or rocks to sunbathe on there.
Nice. And there's anglers as well.
Yes, there is. There's great trout fishing here. Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission stock brown trout and rainbow trout. As a matter of fact, they're going to be stocking again this week, I believe, but they stocked earlier, and the fishing is great.
So in summer, a lot of people come for the beach. You can expect increased visitation. Then as we transition into fall, I imagine the fall colors are spectacular here.
They are. We have a lot of sugar maple trees. So not only are we getting some syrup from them, they're just turning beautiful shades of orange and gold. And that, along with the red maples and the other hardwood trees, it's really glorious. We have 7 vistas in the park. So there, you can get to them at almost any time of the year, except for the deepest part of winter. That's a great place to go and see from high up above, to see the foliage.
We were at Warren's Vista earlier today, and I was saying to my husband, I think we under-celebrate the colors of spring, because standing at Warren's Vista, you could see all the different shades of green. And, there are some places where red bloods are coming out. So it was just spectacular, different than a fall foliage.
That's absolutely correct. And I was noticing that on my ride over to the park today, how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to forget about the fact that during the spring, summer, and fall, and even in the winter time, unless the snow is too deep or too icy, hiking on our trails is excellent experience. And there's an adventure around every curve of it. There are 7 vistas located on the different trails in the park, some of which you can even drive to if you're not able to hike.
I feel that good training for hiking at World's End is squats and lunges, because a lot of the trails have an incline. So if you're visiting World's End, there are some that are more level, but be prepared for some elevation gain.
Right, because the park is located in a canyon. It was created by the Loyalsock Creek millions of years ago. So we would be at an elevation of about 1,100 feet, but at our highest point, it's close to 1,800 feet. So that means some strenuous exercise.
Yes.
But not every trail requires that.
Yes.
So our trail maps will indicate the level of difficulty so that the average person can decide, what their abilities are.
Challenge by choice, we call that. And bear in mind that same elevation is what gives you the waterfalls and the vistas.
Absolutely.
So it's important to the nature of the park, and just embrace it.
That's great.
The park is open during the winter. What could a visitor expect to do at World's End in the wintertime?
Our rustic cabins are open. There are 19 of them, and they have cozy fireplaces and wood stove inserts. And so some people come and just stay cozy in their cabin and they enjoy just being away from the rest of the world. However, although we do not have cross-country skiing directly in the park, we're surrounded by thousands of acres of Loyalsock State Forest, and that is where the ski trails are. So that's an option. There are some other winter activities in the community nearby. Occasionally, there's a winter fest. If you're lucky, there will be a toboggan slide over at Eaglesmere. And I think the hiking is still available on the less steep trails, so you could still get out. Sometimes there's snow on the ground and sometimes there's not. So,
yeah, I love the idea of being in a cozy cabin with a good book and good friends.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The park, I've seen the signs like no hunting within this area and hunting permitted here. So there is hunting available in the park. And so visitors should be aware of that depending on the season.
Right. So they should be aware, especially in autumn when those hunting seasons open, and wear the required amount of orange whenever they're on the trails.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that World's End has been here since the 1930s. So I imagine it's a civilian conservation corps park. So can you share a little bit about the history of the park? And is there any way that people can learn more about the history?
There is a lot of history here at World's End, even before it was a state park. Prior to 1932, when the Department of Forest and Waters decided it would be a good spot for a state park, there was a lot going on in the area. There was huge lumbering of hemlock trees. There was coal mining not far from the park. And all of that had degrading effects on the natural landscape. So when the park was first established, there was not really much here. There were very few trees because they had been lumbered off. There was a sawmill located on the property, and it took a lot of hard work to get all the brush and the tops and everything cleaned up. And that was one of the first things that the Civilian Conservation Corps was involved in. So when they arrived in 1933, they got started. And they over the years that they were here, approximately 10 years, created the most beautiful forest park, I think, in the area and in one of the best in Pennsylvania.
And you have an exhibit here at the visitor center. So if somebody were to stop into the visitor center, there's a replica, a model that somebody built that you could kind of like literally peek into their life. You have some history. I believe that I'm looking at it over there. That's is that a basketball uniform?
Basketball uniform and a baseball uniform. Yeah. So there was the most local camp that housed the CCC enrollees was at Camp 95 toward LaPorte, approximately 6 miles south in LaPorte. And then there was another one in Hillsgrove, Camp 96. That camp had some older, experienced people in it that helped Camp 95, which were younger men, ages 17 and up, to learn the skills that we need to build cabins, roads, vistas, and the rest of a state park. So they worked tirelessly for $1 a day. And at the end of the month, they got paid, but they were told they could keep $5 of that, but the other $25 was sent home to their families in the cities that were trying to make a living during the Great Depression. So it was excellent programming. So the model that we have was actually built by one of the enrollees who worked out of Camp 95. And he showed up at the park in the mid-1990s with the two sections of this model. And he said he wanted the people who came to the park to have a better idea of what life was like at the camp and what he experienced as a young man.
I did not realize that it was actually built by an alumni of the Civilian Conservation
Yep,
Corps.
Frank Sattler was his name. And he also donated several other items that we have either on display or we have it in our record, that we get them out occasionally.
That makes it all the more special.
Mm-hmm. There are silhouettes also on the wall that depict camp life. And they were created by the camp cook. His name was George Bush. And he's well known. Most of the CCC parks have some of his silhouettes in it. He was a very prolific artist when he wasn't cooking. And we have those other uniforms here, from baseball and from basketball, but there were also other sports, particularly boxing at this park. And they had intramurals with other camps.
So there was a lot of hard work, but they also learned how to play, and they expressed themselves in the art. And I would highly recommend that people stop to see it, because these silhouettes have a lot of detail in them, and that's quite an artistic feat.
That's for sure. There were some other gentlemen I met in the early 2000s who were CCC guys, and each one of them said, these were the best years of my life. And I'm sorry I'm not meeting any anymore because it's been a long time. But yeah. But the park now is, let's see, 93, I think 93 years old now. So
soon you'll be doing the century celebration.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as I'm looking around the visitor center, I see some history, even pre-Civilian Conservation Corps. I see your fossil exhibit.
Yes. We have a small variety of fossils there, but interesting ones. Most of them were found here, and they contain fossils of ancient plants, lepidodendrons, which pretty much is the bark of ancient plants. There's also some fossils of ancient fish. And when this area of Pennsylvania was covered by a shallow sea, these fish were active, but during drought seasons or when the water was low, they would burrow themselves into the mud at the bottom of the sea and kind of wait the dry season out. And then when the water flowed again, they would come out of their tunnels. And over time, those tunnels would fill with silt. So the fossil that we find are those blocks of silt that are cylindrical in shape. And they're just evidences of those lungfish burrows and the lungfish that made them. So that's pretty cool.
That is very cool.
Yeah. And I think that all happened in the Pennsylvania period of geology.
Geology has a long history. And speaking of the geology, my husband and I were talking, the geology here is so unique. And we were wondering, where did the glaciation, was World's End in part of the glaciated portion of Pennsylvania? And how did that affect the terrain that we're seeing here?
So it did affect the park area and really down into the lower part of the county. And then that was the extent of it. So it did carve out, well, it's a long story, Marci.
Let's go into detail.
But this area was at one time a highlands. And when the glacier retreated and melted, it did cause all that water to create the canyons of the Loyalsock and other tributaries here. So
I think it's helpful to know when you're visiting someplace that if you stand there, there's a lot more history than what you're seeing today. Mm-hmm. There's the geologic history. There's the Indigenous history.
Absolutely.
There's the history of once Europeans arrived and how we may have interacted with the land at that point in time. And all those things shaped the place that you're standing today.
It's pretty exciting, isn't it?
It is. It is very exciting. And I like with your visitor center, you can get a little glimpse of some of that history over the period of time. So when you're out there and you see something, you might think, oh, This helps to tell the story just a little bit better.
Yeah. Lots of stories are being told here. A lot of people ask us about the Indigenous people. Do we find artifacts from their life here? So I just want to let our visitors know that because of the terrain, the Native people may have hunted in this area, but none of their trails came through the park. They avoided it because of the terrain, I think. So they were more like following the rivers, which would be on either side of the park, either the Marci Creek or the Loyalsock Creek.
That's wise. I mean, take the path of least resistance.
Right, right. And one of those Indian trails did come up through the park just to get from one side to the other. And that's what we call our Pioneer Trail. It's now part of the Loyalsock Trail and part of our World's End Trail. So when the travelers would come from Muncie or south of here, they would arrive at an area where they can cross on over to the Loyalsock. And they had to traverse up through the area of Eaglesmere now, which was called Lewis Lake then. And it came across the ridgetop right above where our World's End Vista is, above our swimming area and the dam. And as people came around that bend, they thought, oh my gosh, it's like a 300-foot drop to the river below. All right. So it was kind of a scary place. And so the legend is that that's how we got the name World's End, because people saw they were in a precarious spot there. And later on, when the trail became a horse trail, from a footpath to a horse trail and then to a wagon trail, there were no turnoffs. So if wagons were traveling to Forksville, which had a woolen mill, or the opposite way, there were no turnoffs. So if you met somebody coming down and you were going up, one wagon would have to be unhitched and put up on the side hill so the other one could pass. So it was very precarious.
Yes.
And I always tell that story when I'm at that Vista. I try to be a little bit better about telling about it than I just told you. I embellish it a little bit more. But there is a true story there. And that is when Doc Randall was coming to Forksville to deliver a baby at dusk, something spooked his horses. And you have to remember that was wilderness and virgin forest. So they were dark even in the daytime. Was it a panther? We don't know. Or was it a big black bear? We don't know. But something spooked his horses, and the team ran off at a gallop. And as Doc Randall came around that sharp bend that I was just telling you about, he realized he better think quickly. And he let go of the reins and jumped up on the side hill, and the horses continued. And unfortunately, they all dropped. They all went over the edge into the creek down below where our dam is. So that's a true story from the 1890s.
Do we ever hear the horses whinnying on a cold, dark night?
I think the only whinnying sound I hear is from the owls, the screech owls.
So World's End, it sounds like, has a tremendous amount of opportunities. So would you mind sharing, like, what are some opportunities if you're visiting with your family? What are some things that you could do as a family here at the park?
Well, most people really enjoy sitting around their campfire and roasting their marshmallows and hot dogs, or making their campfire stews. And when they're not, maybe in their cabins or in their tent sites, they might enjoy lots of cards and games, things that you like to do as a family. The internet access is not very good here, and phone service is a little spotty in places. So I hear parents telling me how much they enjoy being with their children and their teenagers because there aren't these otherworldly distractions. If they're looking for things to do, there's, beside the outside activities of lounging around in the creek and swimming, exploring the trails, doing some fishing, there's oftentimes some pretty interesting educational programs going on. I had mentioned about archery. There's naturalist programs for kids and adults. And there's things that families may even want to say, hey, we're here all week. Is there anything we can do? Are there any volunteer options? And so sometimes I have them helping me in the gardens behind the visitor center, or even picking up some litter or brush. It just depends what people want to do. There's also a lot of activities outside the park in the community, and more so now that tourism is becoming much more popular than any kind of industry here.
If you're an adventure seeker, what would you recommend somebody to do?
I think if you want real adventure, you might like to take a weekend backpacking trip. The Loyalsock Trail runs right through the park. That's 60 miles, but you don't need to hike all 60 miles. You can hike a section of it or do a loop on a weekend. So I think that's the most exciting thing.
What if you've never been to the park before? We often hear from people, I'm new, where do I start? How would you recommend a new person coming to the park? Where would you recommend that they start?
I would start by looking online at the description of the park and checking out the map and what facilities there are here. And then once you're here, we have a friendly staff that is very helpful in guiding you to have some adventures and giving you practical aspects of where things are located and all. Also, we always have a campground host that resides right in the campground and can give a lot of practical advice and direction to help you have the most wonderful time that you're hoping for.
You mentioned 3 things that people need to bear in mind. There's not good internet here. There's not good cell service. And the temperature can be different than if you're coming from other parts of the state.
That's true.
Know before you go is what we like to say.
Mm-hmm.
So plan accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always about layers. Take layers and make sure you have your rain gear, no matter the time of
Good
year.
advice.
You mentioned that visitors can participate in volunteerism, but you also have a friends group here, the Friends of World's End State
Mm-hmm.
Park. How do they get involved with the park?
This is a great group of individuals. Many of them live locally, but we have friends all over the state who support the Friends of World's End and the park here. As a matter of fact, they have won an award through Pennsylvania Parks and Forests Foundation for their excellent volunteerism. I think one of their biggest focuses is on supporting the educational aspects of the park. And so the program that I direct is really enhanced by the materials and the projects that they help me with a great deal. They're very involved even in providing some of the equipment that the maintenance staff needs to keep the trails in good working order. They hold an event in the summertime called World's End Day, not every year, but every few years, where it's a great opportunity for the community to come out and find out what's happening at the park and to learn about the resources here and to enjoy them.
And Jane, are you still doing Mud Day?
I am. I almost forgot to tell you that.
Yeah, let's talk about Mud Day.
So Mud Day is always the last Saturday of June, where we just appreciate the value of dirt. And we come plan to get muddy in our mud pit. And we do a lot of other activities, including searching for fossils, doing art with mud, all sorts of crazy things, but fun things for families to come out to.
I think we did a story in Penn Stewards a few years ago. So we'll put a link to the Penn Stewards story so people can get excited about coming to Mud Day.
Right.
And then we'll also put a link to the Friends group because they help with things like that. If you go to the amphitheater that's here, the roofed amphitheater, that was a project of the Friends group. And if you purchase your firewood when you're here, you know that money is reinvested in the park through the Friends group.
That's right. Ice too.
Oh, ice
in the freezers. Yes. Don't forget that.
Yes. So there's a lot of different ways you can get involved if you aren't able to volunteer. you can financially support them and know
That's
that
correct.
it's being reinvested
That's
into the park.
correct. Yeah.
We're starting to come to the end, so I just have a few other questions for you. If you were to describe the park in just 3 words, what 3 words would you choose?
I think I would pick 3 words that would be adventure, forests, and I can't forget the Loyalsock Creek.
It's so critical and such a central feature.
It
to
is
the
a
park.
central feature, that's for sure. But now that I'm thinking of others, there are many others I could add to that.
Well,
But
throw in 2 more.
so how about just relaxation and I think family time. Family time, that's 2 words, really. But I would even think of more. But there are families that come to World's End State Park and they come back year after year. Not everybody can do that. But there are really families that have been coming here for 5 generations. And occasionally, all 5 are here. And that's pretty amazing. And so I know a gentleman who has been coming here for 73 years, he said. And the first year he was in utero. So he comes back and he brings his children and his grandchildren. And now there's a great-grandchild.
I love it.
And so that family time, family memories encompasses it all, I believe.
I think you're right. That's so true. It's so true in many of our parks, but we definitely have talked to people that this is where they go.
Right. It's the best park, they'll
Yes.
tell me.
Yes.
And I have to agree with them.
Is there anything else that you want listeners to know before we start to wrap it up for today?
Well, I'd like them to know that I would really like to meet them. And if they come to World's End, I'd love for them to stop in at the visitor center and ask for Jane and just allow me to tell you more because there's so much more that I can tell you about this wonderful park. It's a place that you're going to find a lot of peace and relaxation and health improving benefits. It's pretty terrific.
I think that's a great way to end. You have a personal invitation from Jane to visit World's End State Park and make sure you stop by the visitor center to say hello. So thank you, Jane, for being with us and for sharing with our listeners the beauty that is World's End State Park.
You're welcome. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you for listening to Think Outside, where every episode invites you to discover new places, build confidence, and find inspiration in nature. Love the show? Subscribe for more inspiration, share with a fellow explorer, and let's keep thinking outside together. For more resources and inspiration, visit thinkoutside.podcast.org.